Hi everyone, this is Prof. Shees again, and this video will focus on WIDA and state standards and how they connect or match. To start, WIDA and state standards, yes, more standards. However, these ones are for students. So the TESOL standards are for teachers, WIDA and state standards are for students. State standards outline expectations of what all students should accomplish in relation to a content area per that grade level. Sometimes states have their own English language standards about language goals, but most just have state standards. State standards are a good guide to figure out what content you need to teach. WIDA, in a very similar way, are structured standards that define what English language learners should accomplish in relation to language. It's situated into a performance level, domain, content, and grade level. So there's an overlap there in that WIDA and state standards identify content, but WIDA is specific to English language learners and additionally specifies language goals or language instruction. So state standards are a good guide to figure out what you need to teach, and WIDA is the guide for what language to teach to meet that state standard. The WIDA document is a very large document, but it's all organized by a teaching thought process, specifically asking yourself, okay, I'm a teacher. What grade and content am I teaching? Once I've specified that, I ask myself, okay, what language domain does my student need? Once I know the domain, I ask, what language feature does the student need? And once I know the language feature, I can adjust it based on what is my student's proficiency level. This thought process moves from a very large idea to a very specific learner individualized need. And once you have that need, you can better brainstorm the activities, scaffolds, and tasks you need, the methodology here to meet that standard. So let's practice navigating WIDA. This video will use the 2020 edition of WIDA. So you can find that on the WIDA website or on our Canvas page. We'll first start with the guiding question of what grade and content am I teaching? WIDA is organized in section 3 by grade level clusters. So kindergarten, grade 1, grades 2 to 3, 4 to 5, 6 to 8, and high school, 9 to 12. So you would settle on the population you're teaching, that grade level. So in this example, I have grade level 2 to 3, that cluster. Within that cluster, they are organized by content area. So there is math, language arts, science, history, as well as something called social instructional language. That is also very relevant. So as a teacher, I would identify my grade level, and then I'd focus on my content level. So in this instance, I'm pretending I am teaching 2nd to 3rd grade English language arts. Once I found that page, it has a list of the standards, but I need to pick just one standard or a couple. So I can ask myself, okay, what language domain does my student need? For WIDA, they outline domains as language expectations. So they group listening and reading domains as interpretive skills and speaking and writing as expressive skills. So we can see in this visual that they are separated by interpretive expressive. You'll also notice it has the word narrate. WIDA has another section called language functions, which is the purpose behind that expectation. So there's narrate, inform, explain, argue. So in listening and reading, you can narrate, inform, explain, argue. Or when you express, you can narrate, inform, explain, argue. So you can identify which of that aspect of the domain you want to focus on. With this, you can now select a standard. So I know that I'm 2nd to 3rd grade. I want to focus on English language arts. I want to focus on expressive and focus on narrate. That gives me the standards of construct language arts narratives that orient audience to context, develop story with time event sequences, or engage and adjust for audience. Those are just 3 options, but I'm going to focus only on developing the story with time and event sequences. So we have a standard, but it actually doesn't end there. Because if we look at this sounds just like a content standard. Where's the language? Here's another version of breaking that down. But where's the language? So you have to ask yourself, what language feature does the student need? So after WIDA lists those standards, they will list example standards by language feature. So we can see here, this has the standard I'm focusing on, developing a story with time and event sequences. But then WIDA provides some examples of what language goes into that. It could be verbs that or describe saying or talking, verbs that describe characters do, think, feel. It could be pronouns, connectors, adjectives, declarative statements. So here we actually see the language that I, as a TESOL teacher, need to teach in order to meet that content standard or that greater standard. So that big list, that range, actually encompasses an approach from WIDA, which is that language can be broken down into different features, starting from the word level, then going to sentence, discourse, and sociocultural level. It just helps us see the diversity of language use and function and the features that go into that. So you can pick then on your standard the language feature you want to focus on for that standard, but you might have to adjust that based on the student's proficiency. So at the end of the grade cluster, after it lists all those standards, it will have the proficiency matrix. There'll be two of them, an interpretive matrix and an expressive matrix. So to illustrate again, I've selected the English Language Arts 2nd to 3rd grade expressive narrative standard focused on developing story with time event sequences. And I might select for my language feature the connectors to sequence time here at the bottom. Based on the proficiency matrix, so it's that giant table, I can see that they have a section based on connectors. It's under discourse, cohesion of language. We have on the far left, level 1, and then on the far right, the highest level. So we can see if I have a standard based on connectors to sequence time, and if I'm teaching primarily level 1, I would focus on teaching few frequently used cohesive devices that repeat. If I'm using a more intermediate learner or a lesson for a more intermediate learner, I might have a growing number of cohesive devices that also use articles or pronoun referencing. If my learner is more advanced, I'd focus on flexible cohesive devices using substitution, omission, ellipses. So in this way, WIDA gives us the standard and suggests the language feature for us to teach, and then we can adjust that language feature based on proficiency. For some of WIDA, there are no language features suggested, but we can still make language features. You can use that proficiency matrix, identify the level of your learner, as well as the aspect of language, that word, sentence, discourse level, to figure out, okay, what language do I need to be teaching? So to bring this all together, you would take that WIDA standard and add your language feature to make a final conclusion. So here we have, in full, English Language Arts standard for 2 to 3 grade level, narrate, function, expressive expectation, or domain. My standard is to develop story with time and event sequences, complication, resolution, or ending, using connectors to sequence time and events, and to combine and link event details. So with this, I have a much more clear vision of what language I need to teach to help meet that objective. The takeaway here is that WIDA gives us the English language standard, or the language goals, as they are embedded in content. So after I find that WIDA standard, my task would be to go to state standards and find which one matches my WIDA standard, or what my WIDA standard supports of the state standards.